Hi, I'm Eric Siegel, and welcome to episode 11 of my video train blog series. It's the last week of July 2011, and over the last week or so, I've been doing some more work on the layout. I'll show you that work in just a minute, but first, I wanted to answer a question that I've been asked a lot lately, and that is that people want to know how I weather my track. If you take a look at the track on my layout, you'll see that it has a nice subdued brown coloring to it. And the way that I got that, quite simply, was to paint the rails and the ties a nice flat brown, and then I came through with some weathering powders to give it all a nice dusty, worn look with just a little bit of rust thrown in. Now, if you want to know the details of how I weather my track, you're going to have to buy a book. It's this book right here. It's called Realistic Modeling for Toy Trains, a High Rail Guide. It's written by my buddy Dennis Brennan, and it's available from Kalmbach Books for $20. Now, the reason why I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the techniques that I use to weather my track is because the techniques that I use to weather my track came directly from this book and this book alone. And so I feel that if I show those techniques here on YouTube, I'm sort of plagiarizing his work, and I'm not going to do that. I know if I published a book and then I saw some guy on YouTube rattling it all off verbatim, I'd be a little upset, and so I'm not going to do that to Dennis. If you want to see how I weather my track, buy this book. It is $20 well spent. You won't regret it. It doesn't just cover track weathering, it covers all sorts of scenery work. So it's, in my opinion, one of the best scenery books out there. And again, it's called Realistic Modeling for Toy Trains, a High Rail Guide by Dennis Brennan. You can get it at www.kalmbachbooks.com for $20. So the first thing I want to do is show you some of the latest scenery work on the layout. We're in the hallway room right now, and this is the lift bridge that goes across the hallway room. And as you may or may not know, this lifts up like that to move out of the way so that I can get by. And then when the trains are running, it comes down and seats right in there. And up until a couple weeks ago, this tunnel portal was here, but there wasn't anything around it. And I've done all this scenery work in the last few days, so that now when the trains come across the trestle and go into the Colorado room, there's some nice scenery around this tunnel. And this is pretty much how I'm going to leave it. It's pretty much complete. I may put a little more vegetation here and there, but other than that, it's pretty much complete. You know, all I wanted was to have some nice scenery around the tunnel so that when the train came across, it didn't go into just a bare wall. And so that's pretty much how I'm going to leave it, and I think it's looking pretty good now. Another area of the layout that I've been doing some scenery work on the last couple days is this area right behind the trestle area. All this rock here is new, and the only remaining spot to do back here is right there. That right there is the door to the breaker box in the basement, and so I'm going to have a separate piece of rock that attaches to the door, and then there'll be a seam on either side so that the door can still open and close, but you still have some nice scenery when the door is closed. In addition to the scenery work, I've also been cleaning out the space under the layout because it's been a complete mess up until recently. And I've cleaned it all out the last couple weeks, so it's actually looking pretty good down here. There's all the controls for the trains, and then the rest of the underside of the layout is storage for my train boxes and so forth. And if you've never seen this, I guess it's kind of neat. There's a whole maze of tunnels down here of shelves that I store my trains on, so it's kind of neat, and it's the cleanest it's been in quite a while. It's all lit under here. I've got rope lighting that goes all around the underside of the layout so that I can see pretty well down here, and it's looking pretty good. Something else that I'm working on, which is sort of a long-term, slow-moving process, involves the lights that shine down on the layout. I've got track lighting all over the layout, and on those tracks I've got about 50 or 60 lights. And most of those lights are these R20 50-watt halogen bulbs. And they're great lights in terms of the kind of light they shine on the layout. The bad thing is that they get really, really hot. And when you've got 50 or 60 of these things turned on, after a couple hours, it gets pretty uncomfortable down here. And so to combat that, what I'm doing is slowly converting all of these to LED lights. These two right here are LEDs. The one in the middle is the halogen. And the big difference between them is that the LED lights use much less power and they burn much cooler. These have been on for several hours now, and I can still touch this LED light and it's just barely warm. Whereas if I were to touch this halogen light, I'd get a real nasty burn on my hand. So I'm in the process of replacing those. It is a slow process because the LED bulbs are very expensive. They run about $25 a piece, not to mention the fact that I have to replace the fixtures because the LED bulbs will not fit in these fixtures. I have to get one of these can fixtures. So it's an expensive process. It's going to take a long time. Basically what I'm doing right now is as the halogen bulbs burn out, I'm replacing them with LEDs. So out of about 50 or 60 lights that I've got up on the tracks right now, about 9 or 10 of them are LEDs. So I've got quite a ways to go, but hopefully within the next year or two, I will have converted all of them, and it'll be much more comfortable down here in the layout room when I've got these lights on for an extended period of time. Now, just like everything else in life, there are pros and cons to using the LED bulbs. Obviously, the pros are that they use much less electricity, they burn much cooler, and therefore put off much less heat, and they also put off a nice soft white light that I really like. The downside is that they don't put off nearly as much light as the halogen bulbs do, so in the end, I'm going to have more LED bulbs to get the same amount of light that the halogen bulbs produce. But in my opinion, it's worth it because in the end, I'm going to have much cooler burning bulbs that'll make the layout room much more comfortable. If you're interested in getting any of these LED bulbs, you can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's. These particular ones are made by Philips, and this is what they look like. And they cost around $24, $25, like I said. Now, in the future, as LED lighting catches on more and more, I'm sure the price will come down, but right now they're fairly expensive, and so that's why this is a long-term project. So that about wraps it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Eric Siegel, and I will see you next time.